Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving deep into the researcher's toolkit. We're going to demystify two really powerful and, let's be honest, often confused ideas for understanding human experience: reflexivity and bracketing. So yeah, let's jump right in. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about the core problem every single researcher runs into. Then, we're going to unpack our two key tools, reflexivity and bracketing. After that, we'll put them head-to-head to see exactly how they're different. And finally, we'll get to the most important part, the one single crucial goal they both share. All right, so let's kick things off with the big challenge, the very reason these tools even exist in the first place, the researcher's dilemma. I mean, think about it for a second. Have you ever tried to really listen to someone else's story, but you find your own opinions, your own memories just kind of knocking on the door of your mind? Of course you have. It's a totally human thing to do, whether you're a pro researcher or just chatting with a friend. And see, that's the absolute key here. In qualitative research, where we're digging into these deep human experiences, bias isn't some flaw you can just get rid of, because that's impossible. No, it's a reality that you have to learn to manage skillfully. The goal isn't to be a robot, it's to be a really aware and really honest human.
So how do we actually manage it? Well, our first tool is something called reflexivity. The best way to think about it is like holding a mirror up to yourself during the entire research process.
To put it simply, reflexivity is all about looking inward. It's this ongoing, constant process where a researcher has to keep asking themselves, okay, how am I, with my own unique history, my own worldview, how am I influencing what I'm seeing and hearing, and even the conclusions I'm drawing right now? And this is why that mirror analogy is just so perfect. Picture it. You've got a mirror propped up right next to your notepad while you're working. You don't try to get rid of your own reflection, you use it. You're constantly checking in, understanding where you stand in relation to the work. So in practice, this means you're always questioning how your own beliefs are shaping what you see. You're openly acknowledging your unique perspective, the lenses you see the world through. And this really gets to the core of it. Reflexivity isn't about being neutral, it's about being transparent.
Okay, let's switch gears to our second tool. If reflexivity is about holding a mirror, then bracketing is about packing a box. It's a tool for a temporary suspension of belief.
Now, bracketing, which, by the way, comes from a philosophical tradition called Phenomenology and sometimes goes by its Greek name, epoche, this is a much more active setting aside. The whole goal here is to consciously hit pause on your own judgments, to create this clear, open space to understand someone else's experience as purely as you possibly can. And that brings us to this great counter-analogy, this suitcase. With bracketing, you're not ignoring your baggage or pretending it doesn't exist. Not at all. You're acknowledging it, you're packing it up neatly, and you are intentionally leaving it by the door while you do your work. Don't worry, you can always pick it up again later. And this is a very deliberate three-step dance. First, you have to know what's in the suitcase, right? You identify your biases. Second, you make a conscious choice to just pause them. And third, you elevate the participant's voice, making it the absolute priority over everything else. It really is an act of intentional listening. Okay, so we've got the mirror of reflexivity and the box of bracketing. Now let's put them right next to each other to really get a sharp picture of how they work and how they differ. So here's the absolute core difference. Reflexivity is like a marathon. It's this ongoing process of self-awareness and being totally open about it. Bracketing, on the other hand, is more like a sprint. It's a focused, temporary, and intentional pause on your own views so you can better hear someone else's. And what's really fascinating is that they come from totally different intellectual traditions. Bracketing, that has roots way back in 1913 with a philosopher named Edmund Husserl. But reflexivity, that came into its own much, much later, in the late 20th century, out of fields like anthropology, where people were really starting to grapple with the researcher's role. And today? Well, today, they're both absolutely essential. So let's just boil this down one last time. The main concept for reflexivity is self-awareness. For bracketing, it's suspension. And that leads to different actions, right? For reflexivity, you acknowledge and you disclose. For bracketing, you set aside and you pause. And, as we just saw, they grew up in completely different academic neighborhoods. Okay, so they're different. We get it. But why do we use them? Why does any of this matter? Well, that brings us to our final and, honestly, most important section, the whole point of all this hard work. Here's the thing.
Despite their different methods, the mirror versus the box, both of these tools are working towards the exact same goal. They are both strategies designed to reduce the uncontrolled influence of bias, to make the entire research process more transparent and more honest, and at the end of the day, to produce findings that we can all actually trust. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. The goal of good qualitative research isn't to create some perfectly objective researcher who has no opinions, no background, no story. I mean, come on, that person doesn't exist. The real goal is to cultivate a researcher who works with a deep and honest awareness of themselves. Which leaves us with this final thought. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the best approach isn't choosing one over the other, but learning how to skillfully use both. To be continuously aware of your lens while also knowing when to intentionally set it aside so you can truly listen. To be both reflexive and bracketed with intention. Thanks so much for digging into this with me today.